Just like a quick intro to object-oriented programming. I know a lot of you have been flying through the labs. So this should either be a slight review or to solidify some of the concepts. And then ultimately we can kind of move forward because from here on out, yesterday was just like a review to kind of like get you all like warmed up, but I think the class is very strong. And then we will learn not just object-oriented programming, but the practicality to it. And then we will cover like these relationships between these objects. And then that should basically cover the beginning portion of like mod 1. So let's just start with like what we're going over today. And that is we're basically going to talk about what an object is. I'm not going to read this to you and like mock your intelligence, but the main thing here is that we're going to talk about what an object is and then differentiate between an instance and like a class method or these variables. And then we'll talk a little bit about what this keyword self is. Cool? Any questions? Yeah, it should be pretty straightforward. So who here is like programmed in a different programming language outside of Ruby? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh wow, half the class. 7, 8? Wow, my goodness. All right, in that case, does anyone have an idea of like Ruby, is it a dynamic programming language or like a static programming language? Dynamic. What makes Ruby a dynamic programming language and what does that mean?
You can switch types around, so it's dynamically typed.
Yes.
So like you can set X to be 3, and then you can set X to be below, and the compiler, no compiler, but something won't yell at you.
Okay, something will yell. That's very good, right? I can have a variable A, and I can be like, hey, this is 1, right? And then I can be like, A, just kidding, psych, is the string 1. And I could just change it on the fly. It doesn't really make a difference. Versus a language like Java where you have to set it right in the beginning. Hey, I'm going to declare this variable called A, and it will be a string. And I can essentially never change the fact that it's a string because I've set and declared that once I said, hey, this variable A is going to be a string, it's a string forever, right? I can, on the fly, just be like, hey, just kidding again, and then make this an array. And so when I look at A, it's now an array. And so this makes it a dynamic programming language, just to kind of cover the bases there. So what we know about A right now is it's an array. How can I check that? Yeah, like I just do this dot class. So right now, if you know the answer, let's call it out. If like everything gets like really unruly or whatever, and then we'll start asking for hands. But I think this class is pretty good. So I do dot class, right? And now what I'm really doing is I'm sending this message. I'm looking at A, I can see that A is an array, and I'm essentially sending it a message. So there is a method, right, called join on arrays. And what does join do? It doesn't necessarily have to join 2 arrays together, but it can, right? And so if I just run .join, it'll actually take the array and like smash everything together and actually convert it to a string. You can chain methods on each other. So like earlier, I did .class. That gives me a capital A array. I can even check its ancestors. And then it will give me everything it inherits from. And so we'll talk a little bit more about inheritance on Friday, but the idea here is that I'm essentially invoking this method, ancestors, on whatever the return value is of a.class. Cool? So if I know that, right, really what I'm trying to say is with a.join, it's basically smashing them all together. What I can do is I can do A, and everything in Ruby, all right, have you heard this term before? Everything in Ruby is an object? Cool, what does that really mean? Yes, everything will actually be some sort of instantiation of a class. Right? So here you have basic object, you have kernel, you have object, you have enumerable, and you have array. These are classes. This right here, this like array of 1, 2, 3, is an instance of the array class. So let's just check, right? I can do array.new. I can pass it 1. And this just means that I'm about to make a brand new array with one thing in it. All right? I could do string.new, and I could pass it in Wangtron, and it makes a brand new string. All right, I'm making an instance of the string class. So far, so good? Cool. So what I mean by sending messages is on A, we have this array. I can literally call a method called .send and pass it anything I want. And that is this join. It'll do the exact same thing as a.join. If I check A and I check its methods, you'll see all of these methods here that are available to the array, this instance of array. And so notice how all of them here are essentially just this symbol. All of these are instances, right, of a class. So that means that every single thing here is an object. And so when we talk about object-oriented programming, Ruby has every single thing inside Ruby, and what you could do with it is actually an object. And objects just respond to messages. And so whenever you call a method on something, it's just responding to the message that you are sending that object.
Every method is an object as well.
I believe so, yeah. They're like instances. So, you want me to repeat what? Everything in Ruby is an object? That's okay. Objects are just responding to messages, so you're just sending objects messages. That's all. I kind of don't want to move. Does that bother you guys, or you just want me to keep going? I'm going to say it with my chest. It's coming from the diaphragm. All right, cool. So notice how I have like this send here, which is interesting. I also have like this select. I have like compact. I have unique. I have length. But what about if A was a string, right? A cool string. So now I check A, and A's class is a string. I can say, A, what are your methods? It also has this send, right? What else does it have? Include, chomp, gsub. Where are all of these methods coming from? Like, have I defined them anywhere? No, so where are they coming from? They're built in, right? They're built in. They're already inside the string class. They're instance methods of a string class. And so I can call and send any of these messages, these methods, to respond to a string instance. And then it will do whatever the logic is inside that method. So let's like see some sort of practicality, right? If I wanted to, something similar to, I guess, like your labs, if I wanted to make a bunch of dogs, right? I was like, oh, look, dog1 is equal to, let's make this a hash, has a name of Charles Entertainment Cheese. Cool. And we have dog2 is equal to, you guys like have a cool dog name? All right, Snoop, Hunter, Leonard. Okay, interesting. Sure. Leonard. Right? That's right. Ooh, actually, I'm gonna hook you up. Wow. A proper noun. So, what if I did like dog4, and then I didn't really realize, but I did something like nan, right? And I just had like a stupid little typo, and then I said this dog's name is ya boy. But because LaCroix water is very fancy right now, I decided to hook it up. If I were to do dog1, how would I access this name attribute in the dog1 hash? Dog1.name. Dot symbol?
No. Brackets, square brackets.
Brackets. Right? Just like this. And so, what if I did dog4 and I passed it like this name? It'll be nil, and all of a sudden I'm gonna be like, hey, what the funky, right? It's so weird because there was no error when this happened. And so what we can do is we can create our own classes. And classes are essentially just blueprints of objects. An object you can think of is just an instance of a class. The class is just that template, it's just a blueprint. So why don't we actually do that? Very much so like how you had in your lab. Let's require pry because I'm very, very prone to error. And I want to make sure I can test. And how would I make this class if I wanted to make a bunch of dogs? Class.
We're making dogs.
Dog?
Yeah, uppercase.
Uppercase D? What if I wanted like good dog? How would I write that?
Camel case.
What is camel case? like this.
Yeah.
No, that's right.
There's a class.
All right. This is known as camel case because you see like these humps, they call them. All right, classes always start with a capital letter, and then anytime you have a new word or combination of words, you capitalize the next one to let it know that like good dog is actually 2 words. But in order for this class keyword identifier, it's looking for something without a space in it. So I cannot do this. You can even see the highlighting kind of like bug out a little bit. And so this is known as like camel casing. Everything else in Ruby, especially when you're naming methods, will be snake case, and we'll get into that here in a second. So cool. I have a dog, all right? So for me, when I do something like this, I do class dog, something like that, I like to make swag lord.
That's not you.
I wish it was me. I think that would make me V cool. No, I am not swag lord. Okay.